Welcome, and thank you all so much for being here. My name is Katie Dukes Walker, and I'm an adjunct instructor with the Arts Leadership and Business program at the University of New Mexico. Today, we have a very special guest, Ingela Onstad. Ingela is an anxiety coach, a licensed mental health counselor, a professional classical singer, and the owner of the business Courageous Artistry. Ingela is here today to give us some strategies on how to manage stress, how to manage anxiety, and overall adopt healthy communication skills in our professional endeavors and careers. Welcome, Ingela. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you for having me.
So let's just jump right in here. First question for you for today. Can you just outline some general strategies for managing anxiety, stress, and this sense of overwhelm that sometimes we feel in our professional lives?
Yeah, sure. I think that's always going to be a concern, even more so under circumstances such as a global pandemic, and really worth talking about because if we are not taking good care of ourselves, oftentimes it affects how we can show up in our professional world, not to mention our personal life as well. So I'd say first and foremost, good self-care is incredibly important. And when I talk about this with my clients, it's often very interesting to me because I'll say, what does self-care mean to you? And frequently people say, well, that means, I should get some sleep and I should exercise and, do my nails and a face mask or, something like that. And yes, we do want to be mindful of our physical self-care and sort of relaxation techniques, but we also want to be incredibly targeted in how we're also thinking or speaking about self-care in mental and emotional aspects as well. So under the umbrella of good self-care, of course, we have the physical realm, which is, like I said, where most people's brains start to go, of sleep, nutrition, exercise, relaxation. But then we also have the mental realm of maybe a habit like journaling or meditating or some other type of maybe mindfulness practice, making sure that you have time for fun in your life, making sure that you have time in your life away from screens, making sure that you're investing enough time and energy in your personal relationships so that you have people around to talk to who care about you, making sure that you're accessing the right kind of medical care. So this can all be under the umbrella of good self-care. And sometimes our brain doesn't go there right away, or for very ambitious people, which is I'm assuming the bulk of your students have a lot of interests and want to accomplish a lot, oftentimes taking good care of ourselves can fall to the very bottom of the list.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And what if you are feeling this in any given moment? How do you have any techniques or strategies that can help you mitigate these things in a specific moment?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about moment to moment and we find ourselves really stressed out, for some of us, we're going to be more able to tune into the physical manifestations of stress or anxiety, or anger or fear or whatever we want to call it. We might notice that our heart is pounding. We might notice that we feel kind of tense. We might notice actual, physical tension in certain muscle groups, frequently here, right, from all the screen sitting and desk sitting that we do nowadays. For some people, it might manifest in headaches or stomach aches or other types of physical ailments. Some people are going to be more able to tune into the emotional aspect and say, oh, I feel really anxious or really afraid right now, or really angry or really sad. Some people are going to notice that their mind is spinning. So there's all these different levels, the physical, the emotional, and the cognitive or mental. And for every person, it's going to be, their awareness of each area is going to be a little bit different. So whatever your sort of personal alarm system is telling you, pay attention and learn how to rate that, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10. If I notice I'm feeling really stressed out or anxious in a moment, I could take a little pause and say, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I feel? If it's, a 5 or below, maybe just noticing that we're getting higher and higher is enough at that moment to help bring us back down a little bit. if we're maybe on the 5 to 10 side of the scale, that's a really good clue that we should learn how to take a break. And whether it is walk away from your screen or your computer or shut down your phone, maybe it's go take a walk around the block, maybe it's go get yourself a glass of water or a cup of tea, maybe it's go lay down for a few moments and close your eyes, maybe it's call a friend that you can vent to or a trusted person in your life. Maybe you pop in your headphones and you listen to some music or a brief guided meditation. Maybe you do a quick breathing strategy. One that I really like to teach people is what we call the 4-7-8 breath. So that's going to be a 4-count inhale, a 7-count hold, and an 8-count exhale. So we just make sure, and it doesn't have to go super slowly. In fact, if you're very agitated, oftentimes you won't be able to accomplish it very slowly. So it's fine if it's really just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And anytime we employ a breath strategy, it's very important to be mindful of the reason why it works. So if you ask your average person to take a deep breath, what do they often do?
And then there's more stress.
Exactly. They really kind of raise from up here. That's a type of breath that actually creates more alarm in our system. So, and oftentimes they take too big of an inhale. What we're actually aiming for in any type of breathing strategy, generally speaking, is going to be an exhale that is double as long as the inhale. The reason that that is effective is because when we can double the length of our exhale versus the inhale, we automatically activate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part of the nervous system. So when we're in the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight or freeze part of the system, and we notice that we're feeling really agitated or shaken or stressed out or whatever it may be, we can realize, aha, I got to get my parasympathetic nervous system stimulated. And the quickest and easiest way to do that is just to make sure that you're doing some type of breath exercise where you really slow and lengthen your exhale. Another quick and easy one that I like to teach is what I call the snake breath. And all we do there is we take an easy inhale, not a huge inhale, just a very easy, simple inhale. And we just hiss, or sometimes we can even just sort of blow out our inhale with a very, very small pursed mouth, almost like we're blowing through a straw. And when we do that, we dam back the airflow in the breath, thereby lengthening our ability to exhale, right? Because if we just sort of, there's no way to dam the breath back enough to keep it elongated. So even in the 4-7-8 breath, if we're thinking of our 8 counts on the out breath, we naturally sort of do something like that to be able to slow it down. So I think breathing strategies can be just a super quick and easy way.
That's fantastic.
Just calm
absolutely.
down.
So yeah, I hear you saying really the first step is self-awareness. And then after you understand and feel those feelings arising in yourself, then you can take the next step to solve the problem, basically.
Right. It's like number 1, notice, be aware, pay attention. Number 2, pause. Number 3, if you're still feeling that state that you're not wanting, then employ some type of strategy. But so often we just tell ourselves, I shouldn't feel this way. Or we try to think ourselves out of the stressful moment, and sometimes that just makes us more stressed, and we have to actually engage and activate something in the body in order to bring our entire system back down.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how can one manage a healthy work and life balance in an entrepreneurship or small business career?
Yeah, that's kind of the name of the game, isn't it? For those of us who really love being in a business and love achieving and are very ambitious, oftentimes these high achieving personality types tend to push it a little bit too hard. And I'm totally guilty of that myself. I'm just kind of classic type A, go-getter, like to be doing a million things. You are too, I know, as are, I'm sure, a lot of your students. And I think especially now during the COVID pandemic, the lines get even blurrier because we're barely leaving the house. So every day kind of runs into the next. I could just be working every day and not even recognize that it's the weekend. So I think first and foremost, being very mindful of what type of lifestyle do I want to have? And I don't just mean what types of things do I want to buy or enjoy or anything like that, although that's important too. But what type of boundaries do I want to have around my work and my life? And there might be seasons of business or entrepreneurship or, being an artist that call for more commitment, more engagement, longer hours. But we do live in a society that tends to overwork itself. And if we look at other, even highly modern Western societies with strong economies, like Western Europe, for example, they are known to have a much better work-life balance. And I would argue that if we're not attending to that, we actually become less productive because we're so exhausted. And if we don't have time away from a problem we're trying to solve or something we're trying to accomplish, we get on this hamster wheel of go, 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 figure it out, figure it out, figure it out. And oftentimes our synapses are just too overloaded and we're not going to be able to see the problem clearly. So for myself, on days that I'm working on my business, Courageous Artistry, versus the days when I am working in somebody else's business as a psychotherapist, I try to set hours for myself and be mindful of, there's a certain time when I need to wrap up my work day. And I think, strong time management skills, setting up boundaries in our workday of when am I going to devote attention to what project, and also how available or unavailable shall I be to either employees of mine or family members or whatever it may, other people in my life. So I think what happens very often with all of us is we're trying to manage everything. There's this certain pride in being a multitasker, and there's a real fallacy there that people can multitask. It has been proven by brain scientists over and over again that the more things we're balancing in any given moment, the worse job we do overall. So I think a lot of people think that they're really good at multitasking. And if you're one of those people, I would just ask you to, I don't know, go on PubMed and research a couple studies or Google Scholar. It's just not really possible. We are then going to have our attention so divided that we will not really be able to get anything done. So time blocking is one strategy that a lot of people suggest, where you, first of all, you have to kind of pay attention, maybe take a few days to literally write down how you're spending every single minute. How many times you run to the bathroom, how many times you get a snack, how many minutes you spend checking email or on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter, how many minutes of the day are you actually working on projects that you need to be working on, homework, etc. Once we have really been honest with ourselves and accounted for how we spend our time during the day, oftentimes that's enough for people to just kind of wake up and say, oh my gosh. Or, we all have on our smartphones nowadays the little timers and counters that tell us how much time we are spending on there and how much.
That is a painful number. Every time I see that, I think, oh, really? No, there's no way I spent that much time on my phone.
Right. But these little things, some people refer to them in brain science as pocket slot machines. They're very addictive. We like to think, once again, that we're stronger than these machines, but they have been designed with billions of dollars of research to hook us. So whether it's that or it's our laptop or checking social media, if we're toggling between too many tasks, we are going to be less productive. We are going to then feel more overwhelmed. So I think setting really strong boundaries with ourselves with social media and pleasure time, whether your online habits are social media or there's something else, there's likely something we all do that are time wasters. And it's not that that's not valuable and we don't need that in our lives. But if we are, let's say, in a Zoom meeting and we're toggling back and forth to check and see what is on our Instagram feed as we're paying attention to class, our brain is divided. We're not going to be absorbing as much, and we're not enjoying or really learning from either task. So we all need that time to decompress. But if we want to truly get all of our things done in a day, generally speaking, if we block out an hour for working on one specific project and then give ourselves the challenge of not focusing on anything else, right? And for some people, an hour of a block of something is going to be a lot. Some people need to do half-hour blocks of things. But there's all sorts of apps out there like Freedom or App Blocker where you can literally disable some of the sites that you might be visiting that you use to procrastinate instead of doing your work. And, most of us can do anything for an hour. Like an hour goes by really quickly, even less pleasurable tasks. So I think just being very mindful, using a calendar. I see this a lot nowadays that people don't use calendars. They once again get a little overconfident and think they can hold it all in their brains. And we just can't. Once again, it's that multitasking thing. So if you don't have a literal calendar that you're using, look at mine, it's got like color codes for things. I mean, I get a little crazy with it, or if you're using an electronic calendar, that's fine too, whatever works for you. But once you have written that thing down and you're checking your calendar on a regular basis, you free up your mind to really delve more deeply into the more challenging aspects of life.
Yeah, that helps me a lot to write it down, whether it be on a calendar or a list. I'm a list maker. I don't know if
Me
you.
too. Yeah, I've got like 10 lists over here with also color codes. And I prioritize my lists in terms of like A tasks, B tasks, C tasks for, ranking them. Like, where do I really need to be spending my time if I'm trying to achieve my goals?
Wow, that's wonderful. So what I'm hearing really is it's about priorities.
Mhm.
Identifying your priorities, and then um, thinking about this in terms of quality versus quantity.
Yeah. Yeah, quality versus quantity, priorities, and also awareness of how you spend your time. Because more often than not, if I'm having a conversation with clients, for example, about, oh, I just don't have time to do anything, and I don't have time to do this, and there's no time for this. And then I say, hey, how about you take out your phone for me? And you tell me how long you've been on your phone today and how much of that time was spent on social media. Now, of course, there are oftentimes business things that we need to be doing on social media, but even me teaching people this stuff and being very mindful about it, I pick up my phone and open that social media app. And unless I've had a little moment of, okay, Ingela, here's what you're doing now, don't get distracted, right away, our body goes into the clicking, tapping, scrolling module, and we find ourselves engrossed in something that we didn't even mean to be engrossed in.
Yeah, those notifications are strong. So thinking about your time and prioritizing and deciding on a task before you even engage can help direct your time, in other words.
Yeah, and I also think trying to avoid your media first thing in the morning and really get clear without having anything buzzing and pinging and notifying you about what is it that I need to do today, what is most important, whether we're talking about school projects or we're talking about business projects. If I don't, for me personally, if I don't kind of sit down and say, what do I really need to get done today and prioritize that, it's easy to kind of fritter away my time on a bunch of little meaningless tasks and then get to the end of my day and say, what do I even have to show for this right now?
Absolutely. And I so admire you talking about creating and communicating boundaries. I think we probably all, to some degree, can identify when we need a boundary to occur. But do you have any strategies for how to communicate to others what our boundaries are in a way that's not going to ruffle feathers, in a gentle way where everyone in the end can get their needs met?
Sure. So we're kind of talking right now, maybe, for example, in an organization.
Sure. Well, yeah, just any work that you might have, or within a collaboration, or in an instance where you are identifying you're having this sense of overwhelm, there's too much on your plate, and you need to make some priorities. And how do you set those boundaries in a way that you're clearly communicating with others, but not doing it in a way that could be abrasive or misconstrued or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're maybe identifying is that a lot of us tend to take on too much, maybe not realize it at first, and then start feeling very overwhelmed. And then oftentimes we feel angry or resentful. So we feel overwhelmed and we start engaging in this narrative, I'm the only one taking care of this, and why am I doing so much? And whether it's a group project or a business project or in our households with spouses or partners or whatever, it's this narrative of I do everything and nobody else does anything, which may or may not be true, but we maybe can be a little bit more mindful about recognizing when we start to use that language with ourselves. When we start finding ourselves getting angry at others or feeling resentful, building resentment, or being outwardly angry or aggressive or explosive or passive aggressive, that's usually a clue. Okay, let me back up. We refer to anger as a secondary emotion, meaning anger is always covering up other emotions that are likely more difficult to talk about. It's easier to show up angry than it is vulnerable. It's easier to show up angry than it is sad. It's easier to show up angry than to admit we feel overwhelmed sometimes. So when anger starts coming to the forefront or bubbling up a lot within us, whether we're showing it to people or not, that's a good clue for you to take a look and say, what's actually going on underneath this anger? What is my real need here? What is my true emotion underneath this anger? And I promise you, every single time, if you really ask yourself this question and sit with it for a moment, it's always going to be anger but usually anger is the thing that comes out first. So I think knowing what's actually going on, like let's say I find myself getting resentful at a coworker or whatever, and then I find out I'm feeling really overwhelmed or overworked, I'm feeling really behind, maybe I feel kind of helpless, maybe I feel kind of sad that nobody is coming to help me out with something, then that's something that I can reckon with myself and just be aware of that. And then I can try to communicate my needs to somebody else. I could say to my team, in a project, I could say, guys, I am feeling really overwhelmed with a lot of this stuff. Would you be willing to? Could you please? Right? So then we can identify our need, and then we can ask for what we need. And if we're using it in really non-threatening language, like using I statements, I feel, we have to watch out with the I think, because I think is oftentimes not an I statement. I joke with my clients, an I statement is not, I think you're a jerk. That's a you statement, right? That's me pointing the finger at you. So I statements really have to be I feel, and then we have to go for emotions words, because nobody can argue with our emotional experience. But if I say to you, Katie, I feel like you're being so da 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 da, right away your hackles get raised. You go into defense mode because you're essentially being attacked. And most often then that's going to end in some type of conflict, whether it's overt or it's kind of behind the doors, people kind of being snarky about one another or gossiping or being passive aggressive. So recognizing how we feel and having the courage to communicate that to somebody. Sometimes we might need more help than we think we do. That doesn't make us a bad person. It doesn't make us a bad employee or a boss. It just means we're human and we're struggling with things.
Right. So there's a lot of vulnerability in what you're talking about, having the courage to at times ask for your needs to be met, ask for help even.
Yeah. Look, worst case scenario, a person says, no, thank you, I'm not going to help you with that. And then you can move on and create another plan. But it doesn't do us or our professional or personal relationships any good to expect people to read our minds for what we need, right? That's always going to end in conflict for us.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Great discussion here today. Thank you, Ingela, so much.
Sure. It's fun to talk about this stuff. I love it.
All right. Now, with all the unknowns in the world, especially today, how can we cope with unknowns and uncertainty, especially in career and just in life in general? Especially now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. And more specifically, do you have any strategies for being flexible and adopting a growth mindset?
Sure. So what I like to say to my clients who are really struggling with the state of the world right now and all of these unknowns, and this is going to maybe sound a little bit harsh at first, but I say that was always there. We never know what's coming an hour from now. We just don't. We just fool ourselves into thinking we do. We make all these plans and we have this giant trajectory planned out for ourselves, and I'll be graduating then and it'll be like this, and then I'll be doing this, and then this and this and this will happen. And we make plans, and then the universe laughs at us because it always comes a little bit differently or a lot differently. This is really being highlighted to us at this time, and I think it's a really good lesson for us to learn and see just how much we have been operating under assumptions about our future. So all we ever had and have is this present moment. That's the only thing I have right now. I think I know what's coming tonight. I've got 2 more meetings after this, and then I'll be eating dinner and maybe taking a walk with my dog. But a lot of stuff could happen between now and then. So I have to be prepared for the fact that, plan as I may, it might come differently and I have to cope with that. So we're all coping with these giant unknowns right now. And of course, the world of business and economics and finance and university and everything like that is a fairly frightening place to be. And if we tune into the news for 2 seconds, we get even more frightened frequently. I think best and easiest strategy is to take out a piece of paper Draw a line down the middle, and on the left-hand side, write things I can control. And on the right-hand side, write things outside of my control. And I often draw a picture for my clients as well, and I say, if this is the entire world, what in this can you control? And then I go, oh, that's right, just you. That's all. This tiny dot, that's you. That's what you can control. You cannot control all of the other stuff. Now, that's not to say we can't have influence or impact in certain ways, but all we truly have control over is how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, what we say to ourselves, our self-talk, actions and behaviors we either engage in or don't engage in. I can't control when I walk out my door whether other people are going to wear their masks or not. I can only make the decision for myself whether I'm going to wear it or not. So if we find ourselves fixating on all of the things outside of our control, P.S., we don't know, and we can't project this into the future. We have no idea. The future could work out way better than we're assuming as a society right now. We have yet to see. So if we get too focused in projecting into the future or making assumptions about the future or making assumptions about other people, we're going to land ourselves in some type of emotional or mental stress or distress. So really just getting clear on all I have is today. What can I focus on when I get off this interview with Katie today? What's my next step for the day? And then my next step, and then my next step. I will deal with tomorrow when it comes. And I think that's part of that growth mindset versus fixed mindset that you're talking about. I think within the growth mindset, there's a lot of recognizing your own strength and resilience, and recognizing that just because I don't know how to cope with these things yet that may or may not be coming in the future, doesn't mean I won't learn. So even just adding the word yet onto things, I don't know what will happen yet. I don't know yet how I will deal with that, but I'll figure it out when it comes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And this all ties into positive self-talk, being your own champion to a certain extent, right? And just saying that it's okay that I don't know every single thing. None of us know every single thing in the world.
Yeah.
If you can be the type of person who's excited to figure it out, then you'll always find fulfillment in your life, right? I mean, there's always something interesting to learn. There's always something next, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Fully agree. And look, we're all going to have our down times. But you mentioned the term self-esteem, and if we are not aware that we alone are responsible for our self-esteem, that it's a journey and it's a job that we have to do for ourselves. It's not something that someone outside of us or some situation or job or something grants us. But oftentimes we get stuck in the mental habit of saying, I'll be happy when. I'll feel good about my life when. And then that when comes, and maybe you even get the thing you want and you still don't feel happy. And you go, well, what the heck? Right? Oh, I'll feel great about myself when I get this job. No, you won't. If you're not putting the work in to feel good about yourself right now today, you likely will not feel much better when that job happens, when you lose those 10 pounds, when you win whatever trophy, when you get whatever raise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that a lot too in teaching sometimes when someone might be afraid to have a website or even, launch their own website because there's this feeling of I'm not there yet, or I'm not a professional yet, right? And it's this barrier, but there's no one out there who just gives you the stamp of approval, this fictitious being or person who says, and now you're a professional, so you can launch your website, right? You have to decide, that you can do this now, and you can, because we all have something to give to the world. So
yeah, right. That's that imposter syndrome. And it's easy, I think, especially in a school situation, to think, well, I'm not there yet, and I'm not. Meanwhile, there's people who are 16 launching websites and then having an established business by the time they're 20 and pulling in 100 grand, right? I mean, because they dared to try it out and to do it scared and to do it messy and to just see what would happen.
Yeah, we're all going to make mistakes. You can fix mistakes, right? Be fearless. Just put everything you have into the world, and because it's wonderful, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's great.
I like it.
All right. So let's talk about healthy communication a little bit more.
Okay.
What are some strategies for healthy communication in the professional world? Generally speaking, I believe that people really want to feel heard, and they justifiably want to feel valued for their contributions in this world. As leaders, how can we ensure that people that we work with, that we collaborate with, that we mentor, that we teach, feel heard and get their needs met? And more specifically, how do we accomplish this in an online environment?
Okay. I'll get to the online environment after this, but I think when you go, for example, to a party where you don't know very many people, oftentimes the most positive experiences you have at a party like that, meeting a bunch of strangers, are with a person who gave you the honor and the respect to listen and to ask you questions about yourself. And it almost never fails that the most positive interactions we have are when somebody really takes the time to listen and be interested and act like you matter. And I think oftentimes we think the opposite. We think that showing up as a leader means you always have to be large and in charge and in control and know all the answers and na. And I would argue that actually the most powerful leaders are people who have incredibly good listening skills, who are observant, who have high emotional intelligence. You don't have to be born with these skills, they can be developed, but listening to someone, really taking the time to actively listen. So you're actively listening to me right now, and how do I know that? Although we're not in the same room, I see that from where your eyes are focused that you're looking at me in the camera and you're nodding.
Right.
And you're not interrupting, but occasionally you're saying things like, right, yeah. We call these active listening skills, and they are incredibly valued, and I think also very undervalued. So in order for people, all humans, like you said, want to feel seen and want to feel heard. From the time we are born, one of our deepest wishes is to feel seen and heard. So a person who can give us that gift of feeling seen or heard is a very powerful person. That being said, as a leader, we do need to learn how to listen, and we need to pay attention and be observant and not just be listening, planning out the next thing we're going to say. Because that's always very apparent when somebody's doing that, right?
Right. Roadblocks to actually being super authentically present, right? And I came across that list. There's a list out there somewhere. I wonder if we could find it, about those roadblocks to listening, just only listening to have a response, right? Only listening to judge or something like that, right? And I mean, it's so hard not to, even when you're trying not to. And I think even when I'm sitting here right now thinking, okay, I need to be careful with the next question, right? So that the flow goes, and I'm worried, my own vulnerability comes out. And so I think sometimes the intentions are good, even, right, in doing that, but it does prevent us from really having potentially from having deeper connection with one another and really, really listening to someone. Because you can tell when you're standing in the hallway with someone, or you just run into someone and they are just not there. You can tell they're thinking about something completely different. Like, did I leave the stove on? And you're thinking, do I even need to keep speaking right now? I'm not listening to anything I'm saying. So yeah, these are important things.
Yeah, so listening and what I wanted to say was, if we're not good at this, if we catch ourselves often lost in our own thoughts or thinking about what we're going to say next, doing a technique called mirroring. So let's say you're telling me a story about your kid or something. I might then say, oh, so it sounds like she was really X, Y, or Z. Or, wow, I hear how stressful this is for you. Where I'm just taking the time to mirror it back to you. That might, to some people who are listening, sound like a weird or very obvious thing to do. But when you go to school for counseling, you learn that mirroring and reflecting back is one of the most powerful skills we have in human communication. Because what I'm doing is, if I'm listening to a story you're telling and I want to mirror it or reflect it back to you, just even certain elements or highlights, then I have to listen. And I'm listening also for the subtext. I'm not just listening to the story you're telling me. I'm also thinking, how does Katie feel about this?
Mhm.
What happened? What did this mean to her? And then I'm trying to reflect that back to you. So let's say this were, in everyday general sort of small talky conversation, this might not be happening quite as much, although it can be powerful there too. But let's say you and I are work colleagues and we have a disagreement. You sitting down and airing yourself, your grievances to me, and me repeating some of those back to you in your words or with the gist that I'm trying to understand from what you're communicating shows you that I'm taking the time to listen, that I hear you. And people often get concerned, well, what if I say the wrong thing? There is no wrong thing. Because if I say to you, well, Katie, so I'm hearing that you're really, really frustrated with Joe in accounting because of X, Y, Z. You might say, no, no, not frustrated, just more confused. And that even helps you then refine your ability to figure out, yeah, how you feel. So these are more sophisticated techniques, but a lot of them we just do very naturally. And the other main communication technique that I'd point out or reflect on again from what we talked about before is that use of I statements. I feel X, Y, Z, and then we make a polite request. Um, and yeah, so it's like getting into our own uh, reality, our own emotional reality, and then making a request with a please in it. And then that gives that person the opportunity to say yes, no, or maybe, or negotiate something with us. But it's really the most kind of kind and direct type of communication that we can have. And then when we're talking about online stuff, it is really hard. We're all on screen so much nowadays. We're missing a lot of the visual and physical and body language cues that we would have if we were in person.
Absolutely.
And then we're also having this experience of we're on my screen and I can be on Zoom, but I can be toggling into my web browser right now as you're talking to me and I can just scroll my Facebook page. But if you're the one talking to me or you're presenting something in a class or a lecture and people are, have their phone out of reach and they're scrolling, you see right now how even though I'm talking to you, my energy's not there and I'm trying to pretend like I'm here, right? So we all know how to do this. We're glancing up occasionally, but you as the person really paying attention or speaking, you can tell that you've lost that person.
Mhm.
And it's disrespectful to our fellow humans. And really, unless there's some type of emergency that we have to tend to on our phone, what about trying to just be present in the Zoom room? Trying
Right.
to pay attention, trying to listen, think if I could reflect this back to this person, what would I say? Or what's the emotional experience of this person that's shining through right now? And just kind of use this opportunity in this online world to sharpen some of our other skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being present and ultimately, I think that brings about deeper connection with people and hopefully fulfills all of those needs to be heard in the long run, really. So,
Yeah, I mean, I work exclusively in my coaching business with, I work only pretty much with people online from all over the world. So it's incredibly important for me to be able to make an emotional connection with these people so that they feel like I'm somebody that they can trust. And it's possible. A lot of these people, if I saw them in person after working with them for a while, I know we'd give each other a big hug. I mean, post COVID, right? We'd be really excited. We would feel this sense of connection. So you can accomplish it over a screen, I promise, but you have to be mindful of what type of distractions you're allowing into your environment.
mhm. And what about in writing formats? Let's say I mean, so many of our interactions are just, chatting with each other, posting, commenting, liking. How can you bring some of these concepts into that environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to depend on how well we know the person, what type of relationship we have. It's going to many times also depend on possible gender, generation, cultural, societal differences and background. Um, I don't think that we're ever going to go wrong by trying to use appropriate punctuation by saying dear so and so or hello so and making sure that our tone comes across with pleases and thank yous and I appreciate. Would you be willing to? So I think in a way, we're never going to go wrong if we can be a tiny bit more formal and a tiny bit more polite, or maybe a lot bit more polite in our communications with people. And if you're unsure about how to do this, just take a beat, right? Write out your email response and then take a little breather, do something else, and go back to it with fresh eyes and say, especially if it's somebody that you respect, or a superior, or someone, a donor that you're trying to get money from, or something like that, just being really aware that how you mean the email might not be what's coming across. And so always just taking a little bit of time. I get it with like close work colleagues. We might be able to be like, thanks, bro, send, or whatever. Yeah, see ya, or can you do this, right? That type of language. But I think we are tending towards less and less formality in written communication. My husband will receive emails from students that address him by his first name, don't use any type of please or thank you, barely use any punctuation. And for him as a professor, that gives him a very specific image of this student before he has even met them. So, making sure that if there are titles involved, you might want to use the title. Let that person tell you when not to use the title. Let that person say, you don't need to call me Professor so-and-so, or Doctor, or Mister. Just call me Bob. Just call me Joe, Gina, right? That's fine. But I think just being very aware that, especially in business, and especially when we're in the arts and we are frequently asking for money from people in order to continue our organization successfully, always erring on the side of ultra polite and ultra careful until we know that that trust has been developed.
Absolutely. Wow. Great advice, Ingela. Thank you so much. All right. How can we as leaders create a positive environment and support our employees and collaborators and even students, especially in challenging times? I think we've brushed the surface a little bit, but if you have any other thoughts on that, it would be great.
Yeah. If I'm a boss or a person in a leadership position and I have people who are, who work for me or with me, but I'm somehow a leader, I think as leaders, we do have a responsibility to show up in a certain way. And once again, going back to those listening skills, going back to mirroring, going back to watching our body language when we're talking with somebody, right? If we are hunched over like this, what we are literally doing when we cross our arms over our body is we're signaling the very animal parts of our brains and other people's brains, the sort of lizard brain, the limbic system, which is the most ancient part of the brain, that we don't feel safe because we're covering our internal organs. So when we adopt any type of closed off posture, or we are tilted to the side or something, we're literally closing communication down between people. So even being aware of, if you're in a position of leadership, what type of body language do I bring when I come into meetings? When people are talking to me, do I look them in the eye and give them that respect? Do I turn away? Am I somehow shut down? Am I distracted? Am I constantly checking my phone? All of these are generally speaking going to signify to people that you don't value them. And that might not be the case. You might value them highly, but your actions might be showing differently. I'd say another technique that I didn't touch on yet, which we might go into a little bit more later, is to maybe research some specific communication techniques to be used for conflict. There's a communication technique called nonviolent communication, and you can use this in personal relationships, and you can also use this in business relationships. But nonviolent communication is a very specific technique. It boils down to some pretty simple steps. I don't have time to go into it today, but they offer workshops on nonviolent communication. There are books online, there are things on YouTube, and it's known all over the place. And what's interesting is the founder of nonviolent communication, actually, he's, I believe, now deceased, but was from Albuquerque.
Oh, wow. What a great resource. Thanks.
Sure.
And I think the last question I have for you today is really, it ties into the last question a bit, but do you know of any strategies for de-escalating challenging circumstances, in a professional environment, to hopefully end up in a place where everyone can adapt solutions to issues?
Yeah. I think if we're talking about this from the perspective of leadership or management, there are trainings and techniques out there to be used, like I mentioned, nonviolent communication, where you as the leader are setting the tone for how other people are going to communicate within an organization. And people will look to you for their cues on how to do things. Nowadays, we tend to want to hide behind our screens for every type of communication. People will barely pick up the phone to make a phone call anymore. And that's going to set a certain tone within an organization, as well as lead us into the possible danger zone of things being miscommunicated or misinterpreted. Because if I say to you, hey, stop that, Katie, and I'm smiling and I say a silly tone of voice, right? Then you're like, oh, we're just joking around. But if I say, hey, stop that, in an email, you might read it the way I just said it, right? So just, I know that's a silly example, but just something little like that can be misconstrued depending on, we all have our perception of the world and ourselves and our place in the world and our perception of other people. It's maybe we could also call it the lens through which we view things or filter things. So much of the way I read an email is going to be filtered through my own personal lens, or text message for that matter. So I think having the courage to talk about difficult things in person and learning some tools and skills for listening and communicating in a non-threatening manner so that everybody feels valued and listened to. And just as a little side note, I think most often just being able to hear somebody out can oftentimes, like 75% of the time, then it solves the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, they just want to feel heard and like somebody understands, and you don't even need to offer a solution, but you just need to listen, and then they feel heard and listened to and respected. You could even ask them, what do you think there is to be done about this situation? Or I'd love to hear what you would like to have happen. They might have some good ideas, right? But we oftentimes want to go right into fix-it mode. And if we're very skilled at interpersonal communication and managing people's emotions and managing personalities, we might be able to do that effectively. But unless we have built that skill to a very high degree, just being able to hear somebody out oftentimes will diffuse the conflict enough or de-escalate it. And then I think it goes back to sort of mental hygiene habits of watching what types of thoughts we have. If we are engaging in what we call mind reading, pretending that we know what somebody else is thinking, or gosh, his left eyebrow twitched, so that means he hates me, or right, we make all these giant assumptions, making assumptions, projecting
story to ourselves.
Totally. Making up some story about what's actually going on rather than just trying to find out. Projecting into the future, we call that fortune telling, right? Like, oh, and then this is going to happen and this is going to happen. We don't know yet. Or catastrophizing, which is where we take one little thing that's happened and, oh no, I didn't do this one task and my boss is going to fire me and I'm just going to be living under a bridge, right? That's catastrophizing. Try to keep it toned down for yourself and use your own personal calming skills that you need to learn how to build. Have your toolkit at the ready for when you feel stressed out and agitated, and then try to deal with the situation.
Absolutely. Wow, such great strategies for sure. Yeah, it's putting things into perspective, right? So it's not this worst case scenario, absolute best case scenario. Maybe it's somewhere in here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
In the middle you haven't even thought of yet, right?
Wow, that's great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ingela. I think the last thing is just, do you have or know of any resources through the University of New Mexico that might be helpful to students or anyone listening that might be facing some of these challenges?
Yeah, I think definitely being aware of the mental health support that is out there in the community. There is counseling available to all students through the Shack. Sometimes they have a long waiting list, so that's something to be aware of. There is usually, but it's not happening in the pandemic, unfortunately, but it's worth pointing out because a lot of people don't know about it. There's a clinic on campus over by, oh gosh, what hall is it? Over by the Kiva building, I think it's the one behind it, Simpson Hall, is the Manzanita Clinic, and that is the clinic where counselors or students who are in the Masters of Counseling program are doing their first client hours, and they are seeing clients for free as many times in the semesters they can fit in for anybody in the community. So that's a wonderful free counseling resource in our community that a lot of people are not aware of, but it's not happening right now, at least this semester during the pandemic. We're in the fall semester right now. Googling counseling near me, calling up your insurance and seeing if you have insurance and seeing, do I have mental health benefits? Frequently you do. Is there a copay? Is there a deductible to meet? Or calling a counselor or a social worker or a therapist, psychologist's office and asking them about it. There's a lot of what we call psychoeducation that we can do on our own, right? But if we don't have good coping skills for stress in our own lives, if we don't have good communication skills in our own lives, that is going to bleed over into our business life no matter what. There's not really any way around it. So making sure that we have adequate coping mechanisms for stressful times, whether we're people who tend towards maybe feeling really blue and down or depressed or anxious or all of the above or whatever it is. Maybe we're people who have trouble coping with our anger, we have angry outbursts. Really don't think that you're just going to outgrow that. Oftentimes, if you're not learning skills for how to cope with that, it could end up just getting worse. So, there's that. And then there's a lot of, great books out there on mental health. A modality or a sort of therapeutic method that I often like to suggest to people, which especially very high functioning, intelligent people can learn on their own, is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. There are thousands of CBT books and workbooks out there at any bookstore. And it is learning how to identify your thought patterns and then learning how to reframe or rephrase them into something that is more helpful. Because if we're thinking really negative thoughts about ourselves and the world, that oftentimes has the domino effect of having difficult emotions, and then maybe we feel disheartened and we don't try to reach for the things that we know we could, or we don't show up, or we procrastinate, or it affects our behaviors essentially. So CBT is something that many people can learn on their own, as well as engaging in any type of meditation strategy, breathing, yoga, exercise, being in community. All those things just make us well-rounded people.
Wow, all of this is just so empowering and encouraging, I think. So thank you.
Well, I hope people find it helpful.
I just appreciate you being here so much today. Thank you for all of your strategies and wisdom, and take care, and thank you so much again.
You're very welcome. Nice talking with you, Katie.
Great to talk to you too. Bye.